Hi, my name's Marie Hopkinson. I'm a Chinese herbalist and an acupuncturist. And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about how the character strengths and virtues described by Martin Seligman in his book that we've been talking about in the previous episodes. So if you haven't watched those already, you can go back and watch that. How do those relate to things in Chinese medicine, in the Chinese medicine world? So in the 5 elements context, we have this idea of like mental emotional functions that relate to those things, right? And so how might these strengths relate to those things? Why might this be useful to you? Why might it be interesting to you? I think the main area for me of interest is if you know something's a strength for you, and it has been for a while, but then you're actually become a bit struggling to use it. You can go through times in life where you go up and down in things, right? So like creativity is one that I'll talk about quite a bit because it's a common thing and it's so universally used, and it's one of those things where people can struggle to find their creativity when they need it, right? And they might rely on it. So because you're good at it, let's say, because you've got something, let's say you're a musician and you really enjoy playing music, and so you create a career out of that and you like start doing that, and then it comes time for you to write some more new songs and you think, I've got nothing in my creative bank. I've got nothing, I can't find my creativity. Where is it? Why can't I use it now? And so this might help you kind of explain some of these things. Now, not all of these things are going to relate to the Chinese medicine framework as easily as others, and not all of them probably really matters that much, I would say. And also I want to preface this video with these are all my own ideas. As in correlating these two things together. So I wouldn't hang your hat on these concepts. This is just me kind of explaining what I think it is. So you might think that it's not that, and that's fine. Take it with a pinch of salt, a grain of salt. Yeah, so we have a discussion about it, and I'm happy to have more of a discussion, later on, maybe in a live stream or something like that if people want to talk about this sort of stuff. Okay, so the first area we'll talk about is wisdom. Now, within wisdom, you have creativity, you have curiosity, you have judgment, you have love of learning, and perspective. Now, the first one, creativity, would definitely relate predominantly to wood. Now, all of the elements in Chinese medicine, I think I'm going to need to get the whiteboard because I think I'm going to use that today. Let me just get that. All right, I've got the trusty whiteboard. This isn't actually a whiteboard. I had to use my creativity to make something else. This is a painting board, and we'll just draw 5 little circles.
Okay, so you have wood, fire, earth, metal, and water.
In the 5 elements, you have a cycle that goes in what's called the generating cycle. So what that means is wood generates fire, fire generates earth, earth generates metal, metal generates water, and water generates wood. So that's one thing that's going on. These are always they need each other, right? So what I'm getting at is nothing is completely independent of each other. And so when I say like creativity, I would say it relates to wood. When creativity is not there, it's not necessarily that you might need more wood, but the reason why you need more wood could be really complicated. And that's where you need a practitioner to kind of help you, or we might need a longer video to kind of understand that. Now, I have talked about creativity and wood quite a bit on some of my other videos, so I'm not going to harp on about it now, but I think it's one that we can all relate to in some way, because most people have, even if it's not a high strength, there's some kind of inkling of creativity there. Or sometimes I'm sure you've been in a situation where you feel like I've got to pull a rabbit out of the hat today because I just can't get this idea, to the forefront. I can't, do this, and that can sometimes be the problem there with the wood and the creativity. So what does wood relate to? So one of its emotions is anger, frustration, but it's also relating to life purpose and life planning, drive. In a way, like decision making is part of that as well. So I would say, part of wood is, the creativity is part of this. Now, another one that's also in wisdom is curiosity. Now, curiosity is like interest, exploration of ideas, openness. Now, to have that functioning well, to have that flowing well, you kind of need wood flowing, right? You need wood working well because it promotes this free flow and this movement in your body, and you need that free movement. You don't need stuckness and, you know, things built up like that. But you also probably need a healthy earth element, which is like to help you kind of think through things and think about stuff. So that would be like, you know, to be interested in something, you would need that earth, but you also would need fire because it's relating to joy. Fire relates to, you know, desire, wanting something. And curiosity is like, oh, how does that work? And if you feel flat and stuck or you're depressed, you generally aren't curious. You're not, oh, how does that work? You're just like, I don't care. I don't feel anything. I don't feel happy. You know, I feel the lack of happiness, which is, you know, flatness and depressed and sad and that kind of stuff, or just a lack of joy. So you kind of, I would say it relates a lot to the fire element, but you can kind of see how these things relate into each other. Another one is judgment in wisdom. This is like definitely an earth, probably an earth, and also even a metal element thing. So if you watched my video before about the 5 element personality types, now this is also another aspect of Chinese medicine, which isn't a standard way of thinking. And there's a book called Between Heaven and Earth, which kind of looks at the different elemental personality types. Then they would probably say judgment kind of relates to metal, right? The ability of someone to, you know, be open-minded and think through things, that critical thinking. A lot of the thinking aspect would definitely relate to your earth. But if we were to then combine that judgment with like justice or fairness, then you'd be kind of coming into metal a little bit more, and that's another strength. Okay, love of learning is another one. Now that is definitely earth, right? So your earth element is the one that is relating to storage of new things, in terms of learning stuff. So when you're studying a course, you're taxing your earth element more because it's thinking that does that. Thinking does that element. That element does the thinking, right? So that you're utilizing your earth to digest food and also to digest thoughts. So like thinking systematically, you're using your intellect, like that yi, that relates to an earth element. But then also like maybe being motivated to do it would come from the wood fire kind of, you know, aspect. And that, you know, so you could be interested in learning things and have a curiosity toward things, but maybe not be motivated to master the skill, right? And then I would say also your water element comes in, which is your zhi, your willpower relates to that. And so your ability to kind of push through hardships and keep going no matter what is often relates to that water wood kind of aspect, I would say. Again, if anyone's watching this and they think, oh, I've never heard of this before, that's because I'm just making it up right now as we go along. I'm just kind of inferring my knowledge of what the 5 elements are and the mental emotional aspects of that with these strengths, right? So I'm just giving you my ideas. Yeah, okay, and the last one in wisdom is perspective. So perspective, like providing counsel, being able to see a bigger picture, and like, you know, not being caught up in getting bogged down in the detail of the stuff that's happening to you now, being able to see things in a grander context, a bigger context. I think that relates a lot to wood. You know, possibly some of this water and metal as well, but like wood is relating to life purpose. Like people that can feel that they have a plan for their life, or they feel that they can see a greater context in life. And so being able to have perspective requires you to kind of see, you know, not necessarily even for yourself, like maybe this is more personal, and you could say that this is you know, possibly the water metal is maybe more community, because certainly metal is more related to like community fairness and community stuff. Like, anyway, so that's how these things kind of relate. All right, the next one is courage. So within courage, you have bravery, you have zest, you have honesty, and you have perseverance. So bravery, not shrinking from fear, speaking up for what's right, so, and valor. Now these are definitely things that relate to moral upstanding, and doing the right thing morally would relate to metal element. Yeah, just maybe go back and watch that video. It would probably be a good idea if you're sort of thinking, oh, that makes no sense to me. How does that make sense? Go back and watch that video that I made on the 5 element personality types, and when we talk about the metal type, I think I made them in individual videos, so you could look at that if that was you and you're thinking, well, how does it relate? Perseverance, finishing what you started, like being industrious, you know, not needing someone to tell you all the time and coach you or be on your case. You can like work autonomously and get on with your stuff. But also being able to persevere through the hardships. That would be a wood and a water aspect. So again, the water is like, you know, you kind of know you want to do something, but then the ability to actually take that first step, that's really hard, that really hard first step. So particularly when you're trying to quit a bad habit, it's the jur that you need, the water element. Jur is your will, right? So your ability to have willpower is that jur. Okay, so perseverance, and then next one is honesty, telling the truth, and also being authentic and having integrity. I'm not really sure exactly where to put this. Maybe it's fire, just because that's who you are. Is possibly metal again. Water, maybe. It's hard to know. I'm not sure about this one. Zest would be your fire element. So one part of zest is like vigor and joy, right? And just having, being happy and enthusiastic, right? Now, it's kind of the wood generating the fire that kind of creates that enthusiasm, right? Like, so a person that's got strong fire energy, you need wood to you can't just have nothing to burn on the fire, right? The fire burns out. A bad example of this would be someone who has, like, they do actually have weak fire in a way, but it kind of burns up real quickly and then it fizzles out. So really, in a healthy sense, this is someone who's like, I mean, it's normal to go through ups and downs. It's normal in life. You can't just be high all the time, and that's pathological anyway, right? To be kind of bubbly and happy and high all the time. But to be able to persevere through those things and to say, well, I'm going to look at the brighter side of things, I'm going to look at the more positive side of things, and all that kind of stuff requires like wood to generate fire, right? So that motivation and that, you know, going to get up and go again, even though things haven't, you know, maybe gone very well. So that would be that vitality, and that's a very infectious quality of fire type of people, right? They generally are sociable people, or they generally tend to be liked people because they kind of, you know, they exude that enthusiasm and things like that. And yeah, depending on what you're passionate about, right? So there's kind of, you know, that ability to be passionate, to be loving, that kind of stuff is part of that. And that brings us to the next one, which is humanity. So the first one is love, and then you have kindness, and then you have social intelligence. So definitely love would relate to fire. Now, fire in Chinese medicine relates to your heart, your pericardium, your sanjiao, and your small intestine. So fire, it relates to your heart, your pericardium, your sanjiao, and your small intestine. Now, don't really worry about that. You're not loving people with your small intestine, but you are loving people with your heart, right? And yes, okay, it's your mind, but your brain, you know, it's not your physical heart. But in Chinese medicine, it is the heart that relates to joy and passion and your ability to kind of connect with people in that way, to feel emotion. And if this gets out of balance for some people that have love and kindness, let's say, because these are both on that humanity strength, a downside of this could be that they don't have a protection around their heart in that way, and so they tend to get really invested in other people's situations, over invested in their causes, and could become really too so easily hurt, right? So just as people who have a strong fire element, like, can actually or it's your fire element that allows you to feel things, somewhat the other elements, keeping this in balance, kind of stops you from maybe feeling too much, let's say, or having inappropriate emotions, let's say. And it's hard to articulate this because it's not like, it would depend on the circumstances. But this is a very common thing with people who have a strength of love and kindness. They often get burnt out from love and kindness, right? It does benefit them and they do enjoy it, but you have to kind of have some balance there, or perhaps it's just life experience, like learning the skills to kind of balance that out, right? And not maybe giving too much to the detriment of your own self or something like that, So valuing relationships and being able to teach others about relationships and things like that. That's a very fire personality type person. Kindness, like caring, thinking about like being more altruistic and thinking about the greater good of humanity. Just being a nice person, just being a person people want to be around. That's typically a fire person. They tend to be sociable and joyful and nice people. And then the last one is social intelligence. So kind of being aware, like, people that enjoy psychology, they enjoy understanding and learning about, how people think, but they're also just intuitively kind of aware. That's the strength aspect. So you can learn this stuff through learning psychology or watching a video like this or something like that. But also if you just intuitively are aware and you think, I'm just good at, why would I pair up these two people together? Because I know they're going to get along. Let's say you had to break up, groups of people into different smaller groups that would get along and get the jobs done. Some people just naturally have that intelligence and that awareness, knowing what motivates other people. Like if you're working in as a team leader or something in a company, knowing what motivates, what kind of rewards you would offer different people, because different things motivate different people. Look, I wonder whether that's kind of like a fire and earth thing, because a little bit of this social intelligence, like literally the name intelligence, not just because of that, but that is a ye thing, an intellect thing. But then it also requires that emotional connection, which is the fire kind of thing. All right, then we have justice. Teamwork, fairness, and leadership are three things in justice. So where do these things fit? Well, majoritively in the metal element, for sure. One of the things about metal is it kind of relates to orderliness, right? So people that like things in a very orderly fashion, pathology, you can see metal element people can become obsessive compulsive disorder on one end of the spectrum, or they can become hoarders, right? So these kind of aspects are very common in that metal element, or a disharmony of the metal element. So metal element is very much concerned with just doing the right thing and the morally the right thing, and so being responsible, and just not being reckless and doing things just for your own benefit, but thinking about the greater good of society, not just in the humanity sense, the greater good of what taking into consideration people's feelings, whereas in justice it's more like you might hurt some people's feelings, but this is for the greater good, or you think that it is. That's different. So that's where the justice and the humanity kind of are different. Now they can come together, and if they do, that's quite a nice combination, and that would be perfect. We'd have a perfect world if they did come together. But just narrowing that justice down there, fairness, not letting feelings bias your decision, is much more of a metal water. So these types of people, personality types of metal. Water can be very staunch types of people, very different to the fire type, who's very bubbly and sociable and personable, and everybody loves the fire type of person. They're not necessarily fake, or they're just different types of people. But it definitely, that water and metal types tend to be maybe a little, definitely harder to find meaningful relationships, harder to find friends, less easy to get along with people in general in society, right? Now, not necessarily these justice things are people that are hard to get along with, but being able to make that call doesn't sometimes make you many friends, especially when you think about fairness and leadership. It can be an isolating kind of strength to have in some cases. All right, so then we'll talk about temperance. So temperance is forgiveness and humility, prudence, and self-regulation. So I would say forgiveness kind of relates to two things. You could say it relates a little bit to fire, because it's kind of accepting, it's a sociable thing for sure. Accepting other people's things, shortcomings and things like that. But much more than that, I think it relates to metal quite a lot, because metal is one of the elements of metal, aspects of metal, elements of metal. One of the aspects of metal is letting go. Now, not to be crude or anything, but your two organs that relate to metal is your lungs and your large intestine. So what's your large intestine doing all the time? It doesn't do anything else except fill up and let go. And when you have trouble with your intestines, when you have constipation or something like that, and you can't let go, that's when, when you have the pathology, when you have something wrong. So the ability to sort of, let things go is relating to metal, giving people a second chance, that kind of stuff. And then also part of temperance, humility, and one part of humility is modesty. For sure, that's a metal thing. Metal people aren't going to blow their own trumpet very often. They're not going to sort of tell you how great they are. They're just going to do their accomplishments. And also part of that is water, right? They might like recognition, but they're not going to go around telling everybody how great they just want their accomplishments to kind of speak for themselves, kind of thing. Particularly that water kind of type. Okay, so you have that. Then the next one's prudence, being careful and cautious and not taking undue risks. So I would say that is probably a water, between water and metal. Particularly water is the storage element in Chinese medicine. So it's about, winter time. What is winter? Storing up for the hard times ahead, like keeping things in. And a reservoir of nourishment, let's say. So you don't waste that reservoir. You don't waste that. So if you're a prudent person, you're like, I'm not going to live a frivolous, spending, wasteful, let's say, life. Whereas a person who's maybe more wood fire is more likely to kind of live a little more, be a bit more frivolous, for sure. Definitely that fire type can be quite frivolous kind of person in terms of spending a lot and taking more risks and being more, and out there. And particularly a wood element type is more prone to taking those risks. And then you have self-regulation, so self-control or discipline, managing your impulses and your emotions. This is kind of a hard one to think of, but I think like your impulses are the fire. And another aspect you could kind of think of in Chinese medicine is you have this, what we call the controlling cycle. So we would say water controls fire, fire controls metal, metal controls wood, wood controls earth, earth controls water. So it's a little bit of the water controlling the fire that stops that from getting out of balance, right? So if you are highly self-controlled, which is your, again, relates to the zhe, which is your willpower, you have a good ability of water to control fire, because fire is those desires and those impulses and things like that. And so if, most people have some control over that. If you have a lot of impulses and you could say, well, there's no water controlling your fire. It's a completely out of control. Yeah, and it's just burning out. So the last one is transcendence. Okay, so these things are going above and beyond who we are as a person, not transcending into another realm necessarily. The last one, spirituality, kind of goes in that aspect. So these things include appreciation of beauty, gratitude, hope, humor, and spirituality. So transcendence in itself often relates to fire. Particularly the first one, let's talk about beauty and appreciation of excellence. These kinds of personality types tend to really like aesthetically pleasing things, and that's why they tend to spend more money of those types of people. They tend to look beautiful, look beautiful, but also be very attentive to how they look, and enjoy awe and wonder. And that's a good thing to have and to bring that to the world, right? To have that in the world. Otherwise we would have a very boring world if we only had one type of person. So appreciation of beauty and excellence kind of relates to fire. Gratitude, being thankful for the good and expressing thanks and feeling blessed. Gratitude isn't strictly an emotion in Chinese medicine. So you have 7 emotions, and I know that cuts it very, very fine because there's not many that fit in there. But it would probably more fit with earth, being grateful. I would say how it fits with earth is earth digests your thoughts, right? So something happens, an experience happens, and if you're able to digest that healthily, I would say it relates to earth and fire, because fire is your ability to experience joy. And sometimes people who have a high strength of gratitude, or they have a strength of gratitude, they have a lot of joy in their life. They're able to find joy even despite difficult circumstances. So let's say 2 people go through a hardship, and one person comes out of it and says, well, I'm grateful that blah, blah, blah didn't happen, and they think about that. That's what they dwell on. Part of that is your mental dwelling, like you're telling yourself, you're choosing to dwell on something. And that's why I'm saying it relates to earth, because that is your thoughts, right? Your conscious control of those thoughts would be an earth aspect. Now, when that gets out of control, people often have worry, and that can also often be an opposite of gratitude, right? So it's hard to be in a state of being grateful and also being worrying at the same time, right? Particularly on the same topic, right? So that's where I think it kind of relates to that fire and earth aspect. Hope, future optimism, future orientation. This would definitely be a wood fire aspect. So wood is relating to your ability to perceive your own self in the future. Having a purpose and a plan and seeing beyond what's happening now. And people who are wood element types tend to be very future orientated people rather than living in the here and now. That would be the downside of that, right? So it's good to have hope and have future orientation. And no one human being's just going to have one strength. That's it, because some of these things have balances out, with different things. So having that ability to kind of see and have optimism for the future, sort of having a plan and thinking about the future a lot is a wood thing, but having the optimism would be the fire, because that's a joy, right? That's a joy thing. And the next one's humour. So being lighthearted, being playful, bringing smiles to other people. So I think this is also a wood fire aspect as well. Now humour can be a hard one to point into these directions, because humour can also be a sarcastic aspect. And you can have very intellectual, witty humour, right? And some people are very dark in their humour, but it still can be quite funny. So if it's that intellectual kind of aspect of humour, where that person's very sharp on their thoughts, but they're very witty, kind of that sort of humour, fire, earth, probably more the earth, right? And even to metal, because metal relates to sadness. So, and metal people tend to be very intellectual people as well, or can be quite intellectual. So it could be those. If it's just sort of being a laughy, happy-go-lucky person, and being funny. I kind of think of a Charlie Chaplin, you know, an entertainer, kind of humorous person. I would put that more as a fire. You know, what's that guy? The Benny Hill Show or something, you know. That kind of humour. I think that's probably more firewood. That's very entertainer type. Like entertainer types of people are sociable people. Again, the fire types. Yeah, and being flexible in life and seeing things from that funny side and being able to have that flexibility of like seeing the brighter side of things, almost like the gratitude, but you know, you can see how these things relate to each other, right? So transcendence means come from where you are now to see a different side of things, to almost come above that, come to a different level in that, right? So yes, gratitude takes you to a different level of that, and humour takes you to a different level of that. And you need wood, the flexibility, the movement of wood to allow that to happen, right? So if you don't have that movement, you can become very, very rigid and structured. And if you have too much of that, then you don't have the structure. So what metal does is it kind of provides the structure for wood to not go crazy, not go too flexible. Otherwise, you wouldn't have, you know, you can't just have a flow with no skeleton, no physical structure. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to exist in the world. You'd be a spirit floating around. And so wood needs that control of metal to kind of do that. But too much control means that person's sense of humour will be probably difficult to kind of have, or very dark. Maybe that would be a person who has a sense of humour, but if they had metal sort of over controlling that wood, they would they'd become quite rigid, but maybe become very sarcastic instead of funny, maybe, or hurtful in their humour, possibly. Anyway, and then the last one is spirituality. So spirituality relates to faith, purpose, meaning, religiousness. Now, these can have very different meanings. So religiousness, as in sticking to the morals, sticking to what's right, doing things for the right reasons, which I wouldn't say is necessarily spirituality, but it is part of a lot of religiousness. That's a metal kind of thing, right? So a lot of metal people, they like rules and regulations. But people who would describe themselves as spiritual probably don't like rules and regulations so much. They like to feel that they're exploring this other realm, or able to kind of explore this other connection, right, with a different world. Or even purpose and meaning is a would probably relate to the wood. And that faith, again, is very similar to hope, right? So kind of relates to the fire, like experiencing a joy from that, that kind of stuff. So I hope this has been useful and helpful to you. I hope it hasn't just been too random. The way you could understand this in another context would be to go and watch those videos I made a while back of the personality types in Chinese medicine. Now, so just to let you know, this is one way of thinking about things. It's an inference of stuff that we know, in terms of we know what the 5 elements are kind of relating to in a physiological and in an emotional sense. And then we're kind of using this psychology that we already also know in a different, you know, it's a different piece of knowledge, and I'm kind of combining those two together in this video. So this is very out there. This is just me riffing, basically, and sort of having some ideas about it, and I hope that prompts you to kind of think about it as well. I love to think about the world in Chinese medicine. Just how are things? What is the world in Chinese medicine? I love to think about that. And I think it kind of helps to understand, for sure, doing the strengths test helps you to understand yourself. And then if you think about how it relates to things in a Chinese medicine sense, it can kind of help you, you know, if you have found that, hey, I was a very fair person, or I was a very trusting person, and now I feel like I'm not. Well, you could sort of think about how that might have happened in a 5 element sense by thinking either this is the mother-child relationship, called that, this the generating cycle. So, you know, maybe you know, metal isn't generating water, or if water's having a trouble, maybe either earth isn't controlling water, or the other aspect that can happen is it's over controlling the water. Now, the treatment of these things becomes much, much more complicated, and it wouldn't usually be in a herbal sense that a herbalist would treat these things in a mental mode. Like it's not like, oh, here's a herb that we've got to help you with your gratitude. Here's a herb that we've got to help you with, you know, being a more trusting person or something like that. It doesn't work like that. And even with acupuncture, it doesn't work like that either. But what would happen is when you go to an acupuncturist or a herbalist and you said, okay, either you said, okay, just check my pulse, and they would find that imbalance, and then they would if a practitioner is skilled at pulse diagnosis, then they're able to feel what imbalance is there from your pulse. And then they could ask you some questions about what that pathology might mean. So what the pathology in the pulse indicates, what that disharmony in your body is. And the questions they'd ask you would be physical questions, but those physical questions would relate to those elements. And what I'm getting at is if the elements are out of balance, or if you've got an imbalance in your body in a physical way, it's likely that you're going to then struggle with the emotions that are related to those elements. There's going to be something mentally going on. Now, so we don't treat those mental things, we treat the physical, and then your body, as it restores the balance, then you know that natural balance is going to happen. What I love about the strengths test and the idea of like your personality types in Chinese medicine is that it recognizes, hey, we're all different, not all exactly the same. So for you to go back to balance doesn't mean you're going to be the exact same person as Johnny or Susie over here, right? So when we are in balance, we're in balance with ourselves. And your natural strengths can then shine. Your natural strengths of who you are can kind of shine out. And, you know, the strengths that I have are going to be different to the strengths that you have. And so it's about just basically living in harmony with ourselves, within having those elements in balance, and then your natural things can kind of shine out. And also being aware when you do have strengths that might maybe cause some detriment because you overinvest in those things, overuse those things. Like I said, with the caring and the that's a very easy one to kind of think of, because we all know people that have, you know, they're good at caring, but then there comes a point where maybe others just rely on them too much, and you know that they don't know how to say no, like something like that. And then you might have other people that are too staunch, like a metal type of person that never says yes. they don't know how to say yes. So, you know, every strength has a weakness in it, and you know, that kind of stuff as well. So look, I hope this has been useful and helpful, and if it has, leave a note if you think this is a bit weird, Marie. Put it in the comments below and let me know. And I look forward to seeing you again on the next video soon. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thanks, bye.